Hi guys, and welcome back. We are going to continue with our book, James and the Giant Peach. And if you remember last time, something really strange happened. James was out in the garden at night, kind of by himself, and went over to the peach, almost like some just invisible force was just, prompting him to go over there. And he goes over there, touches the peach, and it's a beautiful, beautiful scene, and he sees a giant hole in the bottom of the peach. So this is where things start really getting, well, it gets better for James, but it also gets a little weird too. So, so here we go, chapter 10, here we go. It was quite a large hole, the sort of thing an animal about the size of a fox might have made. James knelt down in front of it and poked his head out and shoulders inside. He crawled in. He kept crawling. This isn't just a hole, he thought exactly. It's a tunnel. The tunnel was damp and murky, and all around him there was the curious bittersweet smell of fresh peach. The floor was soggy under his knees, and the walls were wet and sticky, and peach juice was dripping from the ceiling. James opened his mouth and caught some of it on his tongue, and it tasted delicious. Can you imagine? He was crawling uphill now, and as though the tunnel were leading straight towards the very center of the gigantic fruit. Every few seconds, he paused and took a bite out of the wall. The fresh peach was sweet and juicy and marvelously refreshing. He crawled on for several more yards, and then suddenly, bang! The top of his head bumped into something extremely hard, blocking his way. Now, kind of think about that. What could be in the center of a peach, even a large peach? What could be in the center of that peach? Got it? Okay, probably a good prediction. He glanced up. In front of him, there was a solid wall that seemed at first as though it were made of wood. He touched it with his fingers. It certainly felt like wood, except it was very jagged and full of deep grooves. Good heavens, he said, I know what this is. I've come to the stone in the inside of the peach, which is another name for what? The pit, that's right. Then he noticed that there was a small door cut into the face of the peach stone. He gave a push. It swung open. He crawled through it, and before he had time to glance up to see where he was, he heard a loud voice saying, "Look who's here!" And another one said, "We've been waiting for you." James stopped and stared at the speakers, his face white with horror. He started to stand up, but his knees were shaking so much that he had to sit down again on the floor. He glanced behind him, thinking he could bolt back into the tunnel the way he had come, but the doorway had disappeared and was now only a solid brown wall behind him. That was chapter 10. Chapter 11. James's large, frightened eyes traveled slowly around the room. The creatures, some sitting on chairs, others reclining on the sofa, were all watching him intently. Creatures? Or were they insects? This is a great picture. You guys got to check this picture out. Go look at that. See the insects? Well, they're not all insects, are they? Okay, that's pretty cool, huh? An insect is usually something rather small, is it not? A grasshopper, for example, is an insect. So what would you call a grasshopper as large as a dog? As large as a large dog? You could hardly call that an insect, could you? There was an old green grasshopper as large as a large dog sitting on the stool directly across from him, from James now. And next to the old green grasshopper, there was an enormous spider. And next to the spider was a giant ladybug with 9 black spots on her scarlet shell. Each of these 3 were squatted upon a magnificent chair. On a sofa nearby, reclining comfortably and in a curled up position, there was a centipede and an earthworm. On the floor in the far corner was something thick and white that looked as though it might have been a silkworm, but it was sleeping soundly, and nobody was paying attention to it. Every one of these creatures was at least as big as James himself, and in a strange greenish light that shone down from somewhere in the ceiling, they were absolutely terrifying to behold. "I'm hungry," the spider announced suddenly, staring hard at James. Ugh. "I'm famished," the old green grasshopper said. "So am I," cried the ladybug. The centipede sat up straighter on the sofa. Everyone's famished, he said. We need food. 4 pairs of black, glossy eyes were all fixed upon James. The centipede made a wiggling movement with his body as though he were about to glide off the sofa, but he didn't. There was a long pause and a long silence. The spider, who happened to be a female spider, opened her mouth and ran a long black tongue delicately over her lips. Aren't you hungry? She asked suddenly, leaning forward and addressing herself to James. Poor James was backed up against the wall, shivering with fright and much too terrified to answer. What's the matter with you? The old green grasshopper asked. You look positively ill. He looks as if he's going to faint any second, the centipede said. Oh, my goodness, the ladybug cried. I do believe he thinks it's him we are wanting to eat. There was a roar of laughter from all sides. Oh dear, they said. What an awful thought. You mustn't be frightened, the ladybug said kindly. We wouldn't dream of hurting you. You're one of us now. Didn't you know that? You're one of the crew. We're all in the same boat. We've been waiting for you all day long, the old green grasshopper said. We thought you were never going to turn up. I'm so glad you made it. So cheer up, my boy, cheer up, the centipede said. And meanwhile, I wish you'd come over here and give me a hand with these boots. It takes me hours to get them all off by myself. Chapter 12 already. James decided that this was most certainly not a time to be disagreeable. He crossed the room to where the centipede was sitting and knelt beside him. Thank you so much, the centipede said. You are very kind. You have a lot of boots, James murmured. I have a lot of legs, the centipede answered proudly, and a lot of feet, 100 to be exact. There he goes again, the earthworm cried, speaking out for the first time. He simply cannot stop telling lies about his legs. He doesn't have anything like 100 of them. He's only got 42. The trouble is that most people don't bother to count them. They just take his word. And anyway, there's nothing marvelous, centipedes. There's nothing marvelous, centipede, about having a lot of legs. Poor fellow, the centipede said, whispering in James's ear. He's blind, and he can't see how splendid I look. In my opinion, the earthworm said, the really marvelous thing is to have no legs at all and still be able to walk just the same. Here's the picture of James with the centipede. A lot of shoes. You call that walking? Cried the centipede. You're a slitherer. That's all you are. You just slither along. I glide, said the earthworm primly. You're a slimy beast, answered the centipede. I'm not a slimy beast, the earthworm said. I am useful and much loved creature. Ask any gardener you like. As for you, I'm a pest, the centipede announced, grinning broadly and looking around the room for approval. He's so proud of that, the ladybug said, smiling at James. Though for the life of me, I cannot understand why. I am the only pest in the room, cried the centipede, still grinning away. Unless you count old green grasshopper over there, but he's long past it now. He's too old to be a pest anymore. The old green grasshopper turned his huge black eyes upon the centipede and gave a withering look. Young fellow, he said, speaking in a deep, slow, scornful voice, I have never been a pest in my life. I am a musician. Hear, hear, said the ladybug. James, the centipede said, your name is James, isn't it? Yes. Well, James, have you ever in your life seen such a marvelous colossal centipede as me? I certainly haven't, James answered. How on earth did you get to be like that? Very peculiar, the centipede said. Very, very peculiar indeed. Let me tell you what happened. I was messing around in the garden under the old peach tree, and suddenly a funny little green thing came wiggling past my nose. Bright green it was, and extraordinarily beautiful, and it looked like some kind of tasty stone or crystal, or tiny stone or crystal. Oh, but I know what it was, cried James. It happened to me too, said the ladybug. And me, Miss Spider said. Suddenly, there were little green things everywhere. The soil was full of them. I actually swallowed one, the earthworm declared proudly. So did I, said the ladybug. I swallowed 3, the centipede cried. But who's telling the story anyway? Don't interrupt. It's too late to tell stories now, the old green grasshopper announced. It's time to go to sleep. I refuse to sleep in my boots, the centipede cried. How many more of them are to come off, James? I think about 20 so far, James told him. That leaves 80 to go, the centipede said. 22, not 80, shrieked Earthworm. He's lying again. The centipede roared with laughter. Stop pulling the earthworm's legs, the ladybug said. This sent the centipede in his hysterics. Pulling his leg, he cried, wiggling with glee and pointing at the earthworm. What leg am I pulling? Can you tell me that? So pulling a leg, don't pull my leg. That's an example of what? Do you remember what that's called? Yeah, that's called an idiom, right? So an idiom is like a well-known part of speech that people use to describe something. For example, pulling your leg means joking around, like you're not serious, right? That's you're pulling my leg, so you're not telling me the whole story. You're just being silly. James decided that he rather liked the centipede. He was obviously a rascal. But what a change to hear somebody laughing once in a while. He had never heard Aunt Sponge or Aunt Spiker laughing aloud in all the time he had been with them. We really must go to sleep, the old green grasshopper said. We've got a tough day ahead of us tomorrow. So would you be kind enough, Miss Spider, to make the beds? Well, that was our 3 chapters today, and tomorrow we were going to do another 3 chapters, 13, 14, and 15, and we're just moving along through the book. This is a really fast-moving book. Hopefully you like it so far. It's definitely different, isn't it? It's different than any of the other books that we've read this year, but I hope you're enjoying it, and we're in for a great adventure together. So, you guys have a good one. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.